Good afternoon. It is Tuesday, March 23rd, 2021. This is a virtual special meeting of the Commissioners of the City of Rehoboth Beach. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 3 o'clock p.m. We'll start off with roll call. Commissioner Dick Byrne.
Here.
Commissioner Susan Gay.
Here.
Commissioner Patrick Gossett.
Here.
Commissioner Ed Stranowski.
Here.
Commissioner Jay Legree.
Here.
And I'm Mayor Stan Mills. We have a quorum and are able to formally conduct business. Commissioner Caluzzi is not able to be with us today. I'd also like to recognize with us today is City Manager Sharon Lynn, also City Solicitor Glenn Mandalis, Max Hanby from IT Department, Kevin Williams from Public Works, and Evan Miller, Project Supervisor, and Ann Womack downstairs. Thank you all for being here. Would like to welcome all the watchers, and also like to welcome and thank the participants that registered in advance to be able to speak. Those signed up to speak today include Hoyt Decker, former chair of the Law Oversight Committee, also Sturgis Dodge, former member of the Law Oversight Committee, and Tom Evans, former chair of the Board of Adjustment. Thank you all for being here. I will call on you at appropriate times throughout the meeting. Also like to remind everybody that support documents that are available and embedded into this agenda. And there's also support documents, a big library of support documents on the topic of trees available on the legislative portal, accessible through our city website. Be sure to check it out. With that, I don't have any correspondence that I recall to acknowledge. And so we'll get right to the meat of the meeting. The purpose of this special meeting is twofold: consider appointments, actually threefold. Consider recommendation of the Environment Committee, and then continue review of Chapter 253 trees. Our first set of business will be to consider appointments to three committees, or two committees and a task force. We'll start off with the Wilmington-Baltimore Avenue Streetscape Task Force. The list and the support document was embedded in the agenda. If you recall, at the last meeting, I nominated 13 citizens who represent different retail organizations, restaurants within the city. A good diversity spread throughout the project area. Those members are Joe Baker, Jenny Burton, Frank Cole, Frank Cooper, Daniel Fosnot, Randy Haney, Patty Hoffman, David Mariner, Andy Medic, Howard Menaker, Alex Moore, Elise Moore, Bob Pomerantz, Commissioner Edward Chanowski representing Main Street, Commissioner Pat Caluzzi representing the city as she chairs the Street Transportation Committee, also the Parking Task Force, and Mayor Stan Mills. What I would, if you recall, the support document indicates what businesses each own or represent, and you can glean more information from the support document. With that, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the slate that I just read, subject to any required acknowledgments by tenant's landlord. I throw that in because in the application, it asks for any leaseholders to make sure that their landlord is aware of their participation, because it potentially can impact the front of their store. So we haven't gotten those in hand yet. So again, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the slate of members for the Wilmington Baltimore Avenue Streetscape Task Force, subject to any of the required acknowledgments required for the tenant's landlord.
So moved.
Second.
So we have a motion in front of us offered by Commissioner Gay and a second by Richard Byrne. We'll do a group vote, and if we need to, we can go to a roll call vote. All those in favor of approving the slate as read, signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed say no. And this slate is approved. I want to welcome aboard all the nominees for this new task force. Thank you very much. With that, we'll go to the Boardwalk and Beach Committee, and I'll turn it over to the chair if they'd like to say anything. Jay, unmute yourself.
No, this is a very qualified person. She has a tremendous history in personnel management. She has experience at really high levels of management, and she has degrees to match all that. So, and plus graduate studies. So there's not much more that I can say, although all of us on the Boardwalk Committee, we're great at examining issues and tearing them piece by piece and uncovering every rock. Maybe this new person can help us organize and get going on the right direction. But I'm just joking. We welcome Patricia. Glad she agreed to come aboard. We all miss Gary, but we're going forward. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. It might be important to mention that she actually lives in the Henlopen condos, and so she fronts on the boardwalk and has a keen view up and down the boardwalk, so that might be very important.
Yes.
If there's no questions by the commissioners, then would somebody like to make a motion to appoint Patricia Davis to fill the vacant term of Gary Glass?
So move approval.
And who seconded?
I'll second.
All right, so we have a motion by Commissioner Dick Byrne and a second by Commissioner Patrick Gossett to appoint Patricia Davis to fill the seat vacated by Gary Glass for the remainder of his term. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, no. And the motion passes unanimously, and we congratulate Patricia for joining that wonderful committee. With that, we'll go to the next item of business, which is consideration of appointment of Elizabeth Trey to the Trees and Green Infrastructure Committee. Commissioner Gay chairs that. Would you like to offer an introduction?
Sure. First of all, we have a vacancy. We have actually a couple vacancies, but one because Bunky Markert, a long-term member, has become chair of Parks and Shade Tree, and so a position is opened up and we're fortunate to have Elizabeth. She actually goes by Liza, wanting to join our committee. She's very oriented, very keenly interested in all things related to trees in the city. She actually has a house on Henlopen Avenue, so she's in one of the most tree parts of the city. And as she contemplates her own home renovation, she is looking to preserve the large trees that are on her property in the process. Her professional occupation is that she's an event planner, which we think will definitely come in handy, as we have done and will continue to do a number of events surrounding our commemorative tree program. I had invited Liza to participate in our last meeting, our most recent meeting, as a visitor in anticipation, and also just so she could try us out, see if she liked us and wanted to continue with her application, and she did. So I'd like to formally nominate her now to, in fact, do you want me to go ahead and make a motion, Mayor?
If there's no questions from the commissioners, yes, if you would go ahead.
Okay, then I nominate Elizabeth Trey to fill the unexpired term of Bunky Markert on the Trees and Green Infrastructure Committee.
Second.
We have a second. We have a motion by Commissioner Gay and a second by Commissioner Ed Stranowski to appoint Elizabeth Trey to the unexpired term for the seat vacated by Bunky Markert on the Trees and Green Infrastructure Committee. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed say no. And the motion carries, and Liza Trey is appointed to the Tree and Green Infrastructure Committee as noted. Thank you very much, Susan. With that, the next bit of business is to consider recommendation of the Environment Committee to support April 5 to 12 as International Dark Sky Week. Commissioner Byrne, would you like to introduce this subject, please?
Certainly. Thank you, Mayor. This motion was embedded in the March 19th Commissioners meeting agenda last Friday. Mayor, would you like me to read it again? I did read it last Friday.
That would be fine, Commissioner. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, this was passed by the Environment Committee at their March 17th, 2021 meeting. And it reads as follows. The City of Rehoboth Beach advertised to all residents that April 5 through 12 is International Dark Sky Week. Excessive use of artificial light, known as light pollution, can have serious environmental consequences for humans, wildlife, and our climate. www.darksky.org has great information on simple things everyone can do to help. You can start by minimizing the light from your own home at night. Here are a few simple steps everyone can take. Take a few moments to inspect your property for inefficient, poorly installed, and unnecessary outdoor lighting. Replace old lighting with dark sky friendly lighting at your home and business. And visit a dark sky place or park. That's the end of the motion. The point is simply to create awareness by promoting the fact that April 5 to 12 is International Dark Sky Week. So to create awareness and to let people know where they can find additional information on this.
Thank you, Commissioner. If there's no questions from the commissioners, I'd like to go to the public. I've overlooked them. My apologies to Hoyt, Sturgis, and Tom. Hoyt, do you have anything to say on the appointments which are already done or on the Environment Committee's recommendation?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Sturgis or Tom, do you have anything to say on the appointments or the recommendation by the Environment Committee?
I do not. No.
Do you speak for Sturgis?
She's on her own line, not me. She may not know how to unmute herself.
I just did it. I just did it. No, I don't have anything to add. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. With that, Commissioner Legree.
Yeah, I just received an email from Betty Maya Foot, who is the outreach person for IDA, and she there's a total revamp of their city qualifications for dark sky compliance. They're going, as you remember, some of the requirements are just really difficult to achieve. And she, in her email, she said that they're going to take a holistic approach, and they're going to stop measuring every light. I may have that wrong, but they're going to take a holistic approach, and things are going to change. And they're having 2 upcoming training sessions, and I'm looking forward to that. So the dark sky program is going to change quite a bit, and I have a feeling we're going to like it. So thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to throw that in because this is Dark Sky Week.
Thank you. And just a reminder, I indicated at the last meeting that this is not intended to be the overall discussion of dark skies. I would propose that that come up into the future. This is merely a recommendation to support advertising so that people have an awareness of this program. Commissioner Byrne?
Yeah. So if we pass this, what I'm hopeful will happen is that our city communications department will put out a press release indicating that as a city, we are promoting this and we're promoting awareness of these dates as International Dark Sky Week and the website. And just to add to what Commissioner Legree stated, they've also revamped their recently, and there's just a great deal of information on there. It's very helpful. It's user-friendly, and it's very interesting. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. So with that, I'd like to entertain a motion to support April 5th through 12th as International Dark Sky Week through an advertising program.
I
so move.
We have a motion by Commissioner Byrne, and who's second?
I'll second it.
And Commissioner Legree is seconded to support April 5th through 12th as International Dark Sky Week and to advertise the same. That is advertising the support of the commissioners for this program. With that, we'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. And the motion's carried. Thank you very much, Dick, and thank you for, please forward our thank you to your environmental committee. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
With that, we're going to go to the next item of business, which is really our last item of business, but it's our biggest. That's continued review of Chapter 253 trees and the related provisions in the city code, including but not limited to review of the current Chapter 253 trees, Article 1, City Parks and Shade Tree Commission regulations, and Article 2, comprehensive tree regulations, plus evaluation of a new Chapter 253 Trees and Landscape Ordinance as proposed by the Rehoboth Beach Law Oversight Committee, and a review of other tree codes and associated studies. Before we get to business, I just want to remind you, this is our tree code review meeting, I believe, number 3. At our first meeting, it was largely organizational, where we created and organized all our documents onto the legislative portal that I mentioned earlier. The second meeting, we focused on tree code objectives and goals, and we did not complete that task, so we're continuing today. And also at the last meeting, we were going to introduce the Law Oversight Committee codes, and we did not have time to get to that, so that's where the former chair, Hoyt Decker, is here today and is going to share his insights onto what they did and how they approached it and what they came up with. If you recall, Susan, the Commissioner Susan Gay is the liaison for this, so I'd like to turn the meeting over to her at this point.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. One of the support documents is actually from me. It's the one pager with the objectives on it, and this is sort of goes along with what we talked briefly about 2 meetings ago, and just sort of attempts to formalize both our overall goal, our vision for trees in the city, as well as 9 specific objectives. And the objectives were taken largely from the previous document that I had put together, and the fact that there seemed to be no objections to them, based on the history of the current tree ordinance and the revision process that's been undertaken several times now. And I'd also like to thank Commissioner Gossett for helping me with the vision portion, because he not only is very familiar with the tree ordinance, but with the 2010 CDP, where our vision really comes from. And there are a number of statements within that CDP that speak directly to trees, and they're noted on that one-page sheet. And then the goal, the reason we pull that goal out separately is because everywhere I turn, over all the revisions that have been attempted in the last 7 years for this ordinance, everybody says the same thing. It needs to be more user-friendly. It needs to be easier to understand. So that becomes the overriding goal, and with specific objectives as noted. Mayor, do you want me to read all of them or what?
Well, there's just 9 objectives, right? So why don't you go through them one at a time? And well, I guess as we go through them, what I would suggest we do is look at, how do we put them into effect? Are they really waiting for the tree code to be amended to do this, or are they separate outside of the tree code? And I'll explain more when we get to each one. Go ahead, Susan.
Okay, well then, do you want me to do each one and we'll discuss each one separately, or do you want me to read all of them and then we'll have a general discussion?
Well, possibly one at a time, but.
Okay, that's fine. Okay. The first objective is to, and I'm not sure I would say that these are in any particular priority order, they're just how they fell out. Establish responsibility for developing and maintaining a comprehensive urban forest plan with particular attention to the distinct needs and attributes of the different neighborhoods in the city, recognizing that one size does not fit all.
Well, I think what I'm getting at is for each one of these, I'm trying to analyze what does it take to realize them. You know, this is talking about a comprehensive urban forest plan. Is that not something that can be done separately or should be done separately than the comprehensive tree ordinance?
I mean, I think so, but I also think they should be done. We've talked about this a little bit in the previous discussions as well. I think there's so many elements that affect trees that may not be part of the specific wording of the ordinance, but should be done in concert with the ordinance in order to realize our goals and objectives.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so, and this is one of them. This is a biggie. And I've talked to Liz about it. I believe that she is prepared. She has a number of materials already in this regard. And I think it's something she is prepared to do.
I'm trying to identify that if there are separate things, separate avenues to address these, then perhaps we do that. And they can all be done concurrently, but I think it would be easier to divide them out. Commissioner Gossett?
Yes, I just to look at this, I think one of the things that we should think about, and you're right, a comprehensive urban forest plan is distinct from a tree ordinance, but one should guide the other in that sense, is that in establishing an urban forest plan, Rehoboth is really made up of 5 distinct neighborhoods, and trying to, as it says, one size does not fit all. There are different needs for a country club, different needs for the pines with regards to the established tree canopy in those areas. Also with regards to oceanfront properties or properties close to the beach, about what type of trees will survive in that area. Also considering insurance requirements and what have you. Those types of aspects would fit into the tree code, but also would be guided by an urban forest plan to set those parameters of the distinct neighborhood's needs within the city itself. So I think that's as you said earlier, it's parallel, but both of those facts need to be considered when designing the comprehensive urban forest plan, and then letting it meld down to an actual in place code revision, or a code that is specific to guiding us to those actions that are designed and come from the forest plan.
Well, I think that segues into number 2 for me. Susan, why don't you read number 2, please?
Yeah, the second one is to establish a, quote, right tree, right place approach to both manage risk and enhance environmental and public health, visual aesthetics, and property values.
I think that falls within what Commissioner Gossett just said, so.
Yeah, and the ordinance itself too, because you obviously can't put, a canopy tree in a little narrow stretch of between the sidewalk and the street. So there may be places within the code where we have to address that as well.
Well, if you would read number 9.
Number 9, okay. Establish a comprehensive planting list of recommended native species, as well as a list of invasive species, both based on the State of Delaware Forest Service lists. And I have to tell you, just recently, I've seen 2 of those lists. I didn't attach them today because I thought we'd probably do that as a next step when we get into specifics. But the state legislature, I don't know whether it's passed yet or not, or whether it's in the process, but they're actually making it illegal to buy and sell a number, about a dozen invasive species. And some of those are plants, they're not all trees, but at any rate, we should basically incorporate that into our ordinance. In addition to that, there are lists of native of species, and we should incorporate those kinds of lists into our.
I guess I've skipped around only because I want to show that these are so intertwined, you know, right tree, right place, has to do with the list of species that we want to promote. Go ahead with number 3.
Okay, 3 is to preserve, protect, and conserve the appropriate abundant trees and plantings in the city of Rehoboth Beach.
I kind of look at that as, for me, that's one of the core values of the tree ordinance.
It is, I think, too. I agree with that.
No further comment. Item number 4, please.
4 is to maintain and increase, where geographically appropriate, the city's tree canopy on both private and public land.
Well, if you recall, I mentioned before, probably a decade ago or so, we have a resolution where we're going to try to increase the tree canopy. And I believe that's one of our archived documents in the legislative portal. But I don't remember the content of that, but I don't recall us ever detailing the path forward. What do you do to achieve a greater tree canopy? So maybe that's something that we need to look at.
Yeah.
Commissioner LeGray?
I'm muted all by myself.
No, you're
I believe that the tree canopy is a part of urban forest, and the plan manages that tree canopy. I believe the tree canopy is probably the most important part of our urban forest, and something which we should strive for. The right tree at the right place is critically important, and we're going to be, if I had my way, there would be times when you would allow someone to cut down a tree that's not contributory to the canopy, and at other times you wouldn't allow that to happen, just for coverage purposes. So I think the big part is the urban forest management that we're talking about, and I think the rest of this fits into that, including what would you reread the number 3? I believe it was preserve, protect, conserve.
Yeah, preserve, protect, and conserve the appropriate abundant trees and plantings in the city of Rehoboth Beach.
And there's a reason that's also a great objective, and there's a really good reason that it's there. There are times when you have to plant trees that wouldn't be appropriate at something else. Every time I go out and look at the power lines going over my house, I just go crazy because you can't plant the trees that you'd like to be able to plant there. Mm-hmm. And that is a problem that we've got to fix. And I think that's the best part of the task force, the Wilmington Baltimore task force. We're going to bury the utility lines. That's wonderful. But anyway, yeah, I think the overriding goal should be urban forest management meshed with canopy management. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. First of all, I want to put a disclaimer in there. The Wilmington Baltimore Task Force, of course, has not met. And on the agenda would be to look at undergrounding, but no, that is not a decision already made. Thank you, though, Jay. Susan, did you have anything else on number 4?
Well, I did want to add, you had mentioned that resolution that I believe was passed in 2012. And I do want to revisit. I actually want to talk with the Delaware Forestry people, because my recollection is that the goal of that resolution was that we would have a tree coverage within 10 years of something like 42%. And on the latest data that I saw from the state, we're at something like 50.4%, but that does not mean that we've increased beyond our goal, beyond all of our expectation. It doesn't mean that at all. It means a couple of things. First of all, that 50% is out of date. It's a number from probably about 5 years ago. So I don't know what the current number is, nor do I know, since I haven't reached out to them yet, how often it's updated or how often we can update it. But my understanding also is that the techniques used to come up with those numbers are now much more sophisticated and go to a more granular level than previous, previous evaluations. So the numbers go up. I mean, they measure trees that are actually smaller. And so it made all of the numbers rise. And so that the 42% doesn't have any practical meaning today as it did in 2012. So we are going to need to revisit that.
Thank you, Susan. Number 5.
5 is to address tree retention, tree replacement, reforestation, and preservation of both individual trees and the urban forest as a whole.
Well, again, for me, that comes back for the large part, the core philosophy of the goals of the tree code itself.
Right. Exactly.
To address tree retention, for instance.
Right. Yeah, that's one of the keys to the whole thing, I think.
Anybody else? Nope. Number 6.
6 is to encourage planting and preservation of appropriate trees through incentives and sensible regulations. And I think this could end up being a biggie and could end up including new things. It's difficult to come up with incentives in Rehoboth for these, but I've talked to Liz a little bit about them. I think it's something we ought to really think about. In addition to the regulations of the minimum number of trees and the types.
Thank you. With that, number 6?
7, right?
7, is that next?
Yeah, eliminate inconsistencies in the current ordinance, make it clear, concise, and user-friendly. And as I said earlier, that's kind of the number one thing that has been talked about throughout all the attempts at revision.
I'm just going to say that that needs to be either all caps or bold or both. I agree. It needs to be written for the layperson to be able to read it and understand it very clearly, exactly, so that it doesn't need explanation. So I think we probably all agree with that. No comments by anybody. Number 8.
And then the last one is to establish design standards to minimize hazards to streets and on private property. And this would be along the lines of, this also ties into right tree, right place, so that you don't put a street tree in an area, a type of street tree that's going to tear up the sidewalk in 5 years. There are some where the roots grow down, for example. And there's probably many other types of design standards we can do to get the desired result.
Well, I don't know whether I would add it in number 8 or a separate item, and that is outside of the tree ordinance objective actually is to take a look at other codes to see what the impact is on trees, and any negative impacts we try to eliminate. So again, that's outside of this tree ordinance, but I think it's something that we need to be part of our review. Any other comments by the commissioners? Susan, I want to thank you for compiling all this. So let's go to Hoyt, Sturgis, and Tom, see if they have any comments on just goals or objectives of a tree ordinance.
May I offer some thoughts on some of these issues you just discussed?
Yes, sir.
This is Hoyt, I'm sorry. So first of all, your first item was the tree plan. Just as a little background for you, the concept was contained in Article 1 in the current tree ordinance. It was never actioned at some point during our process of our study. We interviewed, what's her name? The former chair of the Parks and Shade Tree Commission.
Priscilla Smith.
Thank you, Priscilla Smith. And she had never actually, without any guidance or direction, had never actually taken up the issue. And I think that's an important consideration that the Board of Commissioners needs to make. I also had conversations with, of course, Liz Lingo and the city manager, Sharon Lynn, about this matter. And also Tony Sharp with what was then called the Mayor's Advisory Committee on Trees. I believe they spent some time kicking the concept around. I believe Liz actually had provided them with some input on it. I don't know how that ever evolved, but clearly there's nothing been done. But again, to emphasize the point, I think it's important for the Board of Commissioners to provide some leadership and provide direction. And I think as a practical matter, I forget what the name of the new Mayor's Advisory Committee is called now, but I believe they're the right forum for developing that sort of a document. All right, next item, tree lists was your number 9 item. That was part of our consideration. We didn't go into actually creating a list. There are some lists out there now, but I think what's important for you guys to know is that we did come up with the concept of having both a list of approved trees and and a separate list of prohibited or refused trees. So I think that's an important consideration for you going forward in the study of this thing. Next item, number 4 was it touched on canopy trees, and again, that was something in Sturgis's on site here. I'm giving her credit for pressing the committee to incorporate canopy trees as a required element of the tree planting process. The tree requirements, minimum tree density, includes at least 1 and possibly more canopy trees. So again, that's something that we did take into consideration. Lastly, Commissioner Legree was talking about what I'm calling the utility butchers, forgive me. And I don't know how or what can be done to rein those, and I totally understand the need and the responsibility that's undertaken with these things. But I mean, it's just a shame. I'm going to have a martini later today. And when you look at these trees, it looks like my martini glass, and it's just not right. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Hoyt. We're talking about objectives, and any comments on that, Sturgis, and then Tom?
Yeah.
Sturgis, we'll let you go first.
Thank you. Yeah, just one thing, and I thank you very much for that attribution of credit, Hoyt. And it's about canopy trees. One of the things that both that the current code and the proposed code, which was I think back in maybe 2014, perhaps, in my way of thinking, or our committee's way of thinking, failed to do.
Oh, can't hear.
Unmute.
Sturgis.
I'm sorry.
Sturgis,
I got it
Sturgis,
back. Okay, am I back?
You're back.
You're back.
Thank you. I've got to keep my fingers from walking here. So what I was saying is that the proposed code draft that the Law Oversight Committee put forward talks about a high canopy tree, a tree that can reach at a minimum 45 feet in height at maturity with a 20-foot canopy, space. And because as Susan was saying, when you evaluate canopy from the skies, all it does is look at green, at things that look like trees from the sky. It doesn't evaluate how tall they are. That's one thing when we talk about canopy. I would encourage us to be specific about what kind of canopy we're looking for, and make sure that if we, in an ordinance, we do things to preserve the quality of canopy that's desired. The other thing is just, Stan, you made a comment about eliminating risk. And, one thing with trees is you can't eliminate all risk. That's, again, that any kind of code or regulation, has to kind of take that into account. So that if you have a tree, it can fall on your house if there's a storm, and you really can't get rid of that risk. So other than that, I think these are all good ideas and good things. Um, the other thing is, one of the other things that I was just thinking of is, when we look at perpetuating the urban forest, one of the things that I don't think we've addressed as an issue is how to kind of replace trees that are aging out, and so that we perpetuate the urban forest over time. And that's kind of an issue we really haven't addressed. The other thing is, in terms of right place, right tree, right place, you can plant a tree in a situation that's not ideal, that's not the gold standard, and it will thrive and it will grow and it will reach a level of maturity kind of commensurate with the health it can attain in that probably less than optimum space. It doesn't mean that that's not the right place for the tree. What it means is you might need to take that tree out and replace it at some point because it's not going to continue to thrive. And so, my thought is that if we do want to preserve high canopy trees, then I think the code has to be flexible to allow that a tree in our some of our settings may not live to 150 years or 300 years, but it still can be a valuable part of the high canopy for its viable lifespan. I mean, the current code would essentially say, no, you can't take that tree out. You can't take it out. Because there's nothing wrong with that tree until it dies. But so I'm just sort of saying, I'm just sort of throwing some complexity into the works about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sturgis. Tom Evans, you're next. Again, our topic is we're reviewing our objectives.
Yes, I'm just going to follow on with what Sturgis was saying and see if I can bring that home again in my own mind. By the way, I'm not an IT person unless I'm upstairs. I'm in my downstairs office, so I'm not doing anything else. So you yelling? She's okay. About the point that Sturgis was just making has been something for me that's been very difficult because the code is written as it's written to meet only one set of standards, and that is the gold standard. And Liz is doing what it says is that you shouldn't plant a tree that can't grow to what it would be at its complete maximum and maturity, which might be for an oak, might be 100 and something feet. Well, again, the gold standard says that, and I don't know what Liz's number is, that might be 500 square feet of land of perkable space, of which almost nobody that doesn't have a big front yard that the house is set back would have enough for even one of those. But I will challenge you to find an oak in this town that's over 125 years old. There may be a few. And even mine and Sturgis's in the front yard, which is probably a baby at 70 years, I think it's only 55, sorry, is 75 feet tall. And I think its caliper is something like 15 inches. That's a significant tree. If that yard had been smaller, something like we had less green space, the city would say you shouldn't plant an oak there. And yet, even a small space, a tree could go to 125 years. If it made 100 years, this is a benefit over time. It doesn't mean you don't have to replant. And that's part of an overall urban landscape in particular. If you look at New York City, they're planting significant trees in very small, meaning in sidewalk areas, that we probably would never do, because they know they're going to come back and replace them when they reach 50 or 60 years old. But the outcome is you have a much better tree over that period of time. And when you're looking at an urban forest, you're looking at the sum total of the effects of plants over time and their effect on both the environment and on human life. And that is something that is not easy to put into an urban plan. On that, I hope I hit some points that come home to you, but this is one of the things that makes me a little crazy about planning. And I think we might want to branch out to look at more urban planning plans that are done in more urban settings than our own. Like I said, New York City. And I think my urban ecology forestry guy up in Newcastle County is always willing to come back down again to talk to the group. I'm done.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Tom. Appreciate it. Commissioner Legree?
Sturgis is so correct. In 1525, when the Spaniards started coming across our country, they found a country that managed itself as far as canopies go. They managed it with prairie fires, and every so often that would happen, and that would tear out all the young brushy looking stuff. The loblollies would all fall down, and you'd end up with legitimate canopy trees. And a legitimate canopy is the very best asset that efficient stormwater management can have. You can't beat a tree canopy. Also, the leaves fall off in the wintertime and the sun beats down. In the summertime, the leaves are there to keep everybody cooler. And when heavy rains come, it dribbles down to the ground and slows everything down. The trees take out all the impurities, and it's just a great synergistic ecology. And I think we ought to keep that in mind. And something else we've been doing, we've been allowing people to cut down these great big trees that happen to sit in the middle of their planned house. And we allow them to move these trees to the periphery of their property where they can be underneath the power lines, and that's bad. And that's what Sturgis was getting at. There may be places where a really great canopy tree can grow, and you may not even think it, but it'll work. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? I would like to say that I've always thought that something that our current code is missing, and that is the opportunity for flexibility. That certain situations, especially within the zoning code, that if a tree's in quote unquote the wrong place, that we ought to offer flexibility in a way to retain that tree, or incentives to retain that tree by using trade-offs. And again, that's something that I would like to see added as an objective.
Yeah, and that
If there's
goes
no
along
more
with
comments there, I would like to.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think that goes along with the whole incentives objective. It's the same
Yeah,
thing.
okay, very good. I'd like that word flexibility in there somewhere, I guess.
Right,
But,
okay, yeah.
If there's no further comments and without objection, I'd like to say that basically we informally adopt this set of objectives. I think that we adopt them, it'll serve as a foundation for the other committees and commissions to evaluate the proposed new codes, as well as evaluate the current code and even what the Planning Commission presented to us. I think that's very important. If there's no further questions or comments by the commissioners, then what I'd like to do is go to the second part of this, and that is present information out of the Law Oversight Committee, including but not limited to advise the charge instructions given by the mayor and commissioners, how the committee approached the topic, and proposal of the new code. Hoyt, I'm just going to give you the floor. If you would like to take this opportunity to orally introduce the topics, we certainly have a lot of reading to do, but your introduction would be very welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. So what I'd like to do is basically present you with information that is contained in a memo that is posted as a support document today. And from that, I've drawn out what are basically, I'm calling 7 different slides or excerpts from the thing. So I'm just going to wheel through this if you'll permit me. You identified 3 or 4, maybe 5 different specific items in your outline. I've condensed those down to 3, so here we go. The first one I'm going to discuss is advising what charge and instructions the LOC, that's the Law Oversight Committee, I'm going to use the term LOC on that, and how they approach the subject. So I'm going to go to the first document, which is also a support document. I call it slide 1. So
Bring up it.
okay, so at the December 21, 2018 Board of Commissioners regular meeting, I gave an elaborate slide presentation with an accompanying memo detailing how the LOC's tree ordinance mission was established and how the goals and study process was developed. Commissioner Gay identified those in her March 2, 2021 compilation document. And just to tick off the 4 items that reference the LOC, develop rules and encourage the planting and preservation of trees, establish standards, document policies, and develop a comprehensive tree plan. So you've discussed much of that already this afternoon. The presentation also highlighted steps that the LOC had taken to that point in its approach to and development of a draft product. Much of this flowed from discussions with various different sources, including the Planning Commission, specifically David Mellon and Brian Patterson, as well as the 2014 Planning Commission report. We spoke with city officials, including Sharon Lynn, former building inspector Don Molina, and Liz Lingo, city arborist, and several different city bodies. I mentioned earlier Priscilla Smith and the Parks and Shade Tree Commission. We also spoke with Tony Sharp with what was then called the Mayor's Advisory Committee on Trees. We spoke to a number of tree professionals and building contractors, and of course, we also got public input. I'm going to move now to slide number 2, which is the second page of 7 on your support document. The following relevant input was received from the following sources. The city arborist suggested correct technical issues like diameter versus caliper, simplify the definitions, consider tree for tree replacement, evaluate minimum density requirements, clarify tree removal conditions, require notice for property owners when there's an appeal, and updating the tree list, which we also just talked about, and consider reconstituting the purpose and objectives of the Parks and Shade Tree Commission, including its responsibility for the comprehensive tree plan. Next, we spoke with tree professionals who recommended items concerning the city arborist functions, definitions, mitigation, the Parks and Shade Tree Commission and its responsibilities, tree removal, tree protection during construction, tree maintenance, street trees, which are, that's just a term to acknowledge the trees that are on public land, typically between the curb and the sidewalk in a residential neighborhood. And then power line tree trimming. Building contractors recommended specific tree protection during foundation construction, what they called overdigging, trees in the footprint, something that I think just came up in your discussions, trees in the setback, ordinance notice at property transfers, tree removal, mitigation, again, the Parks and Shade Tree Commission, and the city arborist functions. All right, so now I'm going to move down to the third slide. In addition to the foregoing, the LOC studied several of the following issues: tree planting requirements, unwritten practices, and again, this is kind of tree list would be a good example of that. License requirements, tree plan inspections, permit costs, notice requirements, and again, at the bottom is tree list. And then I'm now going to move on to the second provision, which is actually a couple of items from the mayor's outline. That is presenting the LOC's new proposal for 253 and allowing for dissenting opinions. So let's see, it was at the July 17, 2020 Board of Commissioners regular meeting that I presented the tree ordinance proposal, which was version 2, March 2020. And I'll note that the version 1 is, you can ignore that. That was just a forerunner for the actual proposed document. But anyway, there was also.
Let me interrupt a minute.
Sure.
I think that's a good point. Susan, if I recall, in our legislative portal, we have a version 1 and a version 2. I've just heard, Hoyt, you said that we can omit or delete version 1. Is that correct?
Yeah, version 2 replaced version 1. So.
Yeah, okay. I
All
thought
right,
it was
thank
only
you.
one, but I could be wrong. Okay.
Yeah.
that's good.
Thank you. Okay.
All right. So anyway, there was a cover memo dated July 6th,
Mhm.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Which includes, which includes, among other elements, highlights and a chart identifying the specific changes from the existing 253. And I'm going to reference those a little bit later on. I'm not going to make any comments about it. If you have questions, I'll be happy not to be able to answer them. But anyway, now I'd like to go through some of the specific changes that are identified. This is still on slide number 3 that are contained in the draft proposal. So number 1, annual tree plan. As I mentioned to you earlier in the conversation this afternoon, the function was a responsibility of the Parks and Shade Tree Commission. It was never actually implemented. The LLC considered transferring this as a matter of a provision in the rule to the city arborist, but it was decided that that really served no specific purpose, and it would be too inflexible, if I can use the mayor's term there, in the opposite form, for purposes of keeping progress on the area. So anyway, second item, mitigation. This function has been removed and replaced with a fee of $600 per tree. It was inserted as an element to the replacement of protected trees original provision, which was 253.12. And the objective there is to eliminate an avenue for needless and time-consuming appeals. A substantial number of the Parks and Shade Tree Commission activity revolves around that issue. Number 3, protected trees. This is in definitions, substantially altering the current definition. The specimen and historic trees were eliminated. The term is defined now based on size and whether it meets the minimum density requirements. Number 4, minimum density requirements. It reworks the requirements of more closely aligned with the type of lot and retaining the basic 3 trees per roughly 5,000 square foot concept. It eliminates dwelling unit requirements and it emphasizes lot size. It creates an option for line trees to meet these requirements. Number 5, natural area. The term natural area requirements is used to describe that portion of a lot that could be available for trees. And again, this is something I think you were just touching on, describing, how some tree, maybe it was Sturgis that mentioned it, that will thrive in spite of the fact that there's not that much area for them to be considered. All right, number 6, landscape. This term is used to define and expand the scope of the charter. It appears mainly in the maintenance section 253.7 of the new proposed ordinance. And then tree protection is number 7. Prohibit tree removal without authority and reworking requirements for tree protection during construction. Number 8, tree plans. Under this revised provision, a tree plan form will be used rather than stipulating the requirements of the code. Here again, we're looking for flexibility. A new form will be created, or should be created, which will allow the city to alter requirements without necessitating a code revision. Number 9, I'm getting there. Tree removal permits. This establishes requirements for the removal of protected trees. And it also delineates under what conditions a permit will be issued. For example, when a tree is determined to be dead. 10, appeals. Significantly strengthens the provision. It reworks the current 253-36, and it incorporates language that parallels the process of the Board of Adjustment for appeals and variances. It also adds a section for appeals of the Tree Ordinance Commission, which I've renamed from the Parks and Shade Tree Commission. And it sets up a mechanism by which decisions can be made, to appeal to the Board of Commissioners. Number 11, enforcement. This is a restructured provision from the original document to provide the city arborists with specific authority and responsibilities for ensuring compliance with the tree code. And finally, number 12, violations and penalties. It expands the penalties to apply to all violations to correct this omission in the current code. The current code only describes fines for removing a tree without a permit. A specific fee of $1,200 per tree, or twice the replacement price that I referred to earlier, is imposed for protected trees destroyed in violation of the code. For consistency with the city code, civil penalties shall be applied in addition to other enforcement actions. So if you have it available, you might want to take a quick look, and I'll just be quiet here for a moment to reference the 2-page document, which represents a chart comparing the old ordinance with our new proposed provisions. And again, if you have questions about it, I won't be able to answer them. It's been too long ago. And then down to the next to last, number 6 slide. I had concerns about what we were passing along to the Board of Commissioners and as well as Sturgis, and we identified them in a couple documents that we attached to the memo that we sent to you last year. So her items were mandating off-site storage of building materials and requirement as part of tree protection during construction, adding issues to the appeals provision that could be adjudicated, and 3, professional rewrite of the zoning code, which conflicts with the tree ordinance. That's something that Susan mentioned.
Boyd, would you mind deferring to Sturgis a few minutes to offer her time to, if she wants to explain any of those?
I'm happy to. Go for it.
Sturgis, do you?
And I'm
would
here.
you
Yeah, I will. And basically, just to kind of explain, kind of what I've noticed over time is that, the current code does offer provisions to protect trees during construction. But what I've noticed is that when construction crews store equipment and supplies on the lots as they're building them, those sort of minimal orange netting things around trees get compressed, and it creates just a real cumbersome enforcement problem for the arborist and the building inspector, I believe. And so I thought that just saying you got to find somewhere else, there's just simply not enough room on those lots is really more honest and helpful to the trees. The thing about issues to appeals provision, the appeals provision does not address appealing except in the case of the removal of a tree, in my recollection. So it doesn't address the other sort of issues that people might want to appeal, like construction plan orders, planting plans, tree replacement plans, tree trimming orders, fees for repairs, enforcement orders. I mean, my thought is that, any decision of building inspector or the city arborist with regard to trees should be, if should be able to be appealed, not just have it be limited. And again, I think the business about the zoning code goes without it's a little too detailed for me to get into at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Sturgis. Hoyt, back to you with your dissent.
Okay, thank you.
Explanation.
Thank you. I guess there's 5 items. Landscape term does not adequately address excuse me, the term does not add any significant benefit or protection, is my contention. Inclusion of line trees can be confusing and impractical. I understand the concept, and it does give you more trees, but it creates some problems such as requiring surveys, and more importantly, conflicts which could evolve between neighbors, especially when there's a property transfer. So tree requirements in the natural area on commercial lots. I believe that that's an underutilized opportunity that I think deserves some consideration. All right, specifying invasive trees names is questionable. There's reference to several specific species, and that's fine, but I think that should be part of the tree list, as I mentioned earlier. And finally, include a progressive fee schedule based on the DBH inches for protected tree replacement. All right, and then if I may continue, I'm going to move on to the last slide. Other input was part of the mayor's outline. And I've identified a number of different issues and possible further subjects for consideration as part of your review process. These matters were introduced in conversations and email exchanges I've had with Liz Lingo, the city arborist, after the presentation that we made back in July at the Board of Commissioners regular meeting of that month. They've never really been fully explored, and they're only, maybe at this point, a wish list items, but nevertheless, they include possible records of interest and specifically data on the arborist decisions to include orders, requirements, and determinations, records of the city arborist decisions made on, taken to the city manager or to a court of law, data on enforcement actions, categories of enforcement actions, outcomes of enforcement actions, and records of fines imposed and collected. About the only thing that's available on any of that at this point is the accounting record that identifies when fines are assessed. Beyond that, there's nothing on the books at this point. And then next would be other possible issues to be considered, mainly about the city arborist functions. And there's a specific provision on that, 253.4, and that might include additional descriptions of inspections, tree removal, and periodic reports on total permits and approval and denial items. And then again, the tree list, I keep coming back to that. My question on that is who determines and oversees the process? And I think your earlier conversation, getting the state standards involved might be beneficial towards that end. And then tree maintenance, which is a different provision. The concept is that no person, again, maintenance on public property, this needs clarification. It's a situation when somebody either voluntarily puts a tree between the curb and their sidewalk in front of their house, or it's directed to be done by the city arborist as a means of getting the minimum tree density requirement met. And, it really needs some further study and clarification because it creates a lot of confusion. And then finally, to the point again that Commissioner Gate made back in February, at your first meeting, I fully support the concept and have repeatedly suggested the concept of rewriting the zoning code. I know you're giving some thought, or at least there was early consideration of giving some thought to the whole general code, but certainly the zoning code needs some attention. And just as a final point, I'm not sure who you guys go to in situations like that, but I have had some pretty good experiences with people at the general code publication, the folks that put out your general code right now. So, all right, that's all I've got. Thank you.
Hoyt, let me clarify the possible records of interest you just talked about a couple minutes ago. Those are records that are not being maintained now, and you suggest that they be created and maintained going forward?
I'm not sure that there is a you know, an aggregation or a coalition of documents. Certainly, Liz Linga, the city arborist, you know, she's going through these processes. And my point is that if we start collecting the data, if we keep, you know, you require monthly reports from your building inspector, and it's the same sort of information that I think would provide some useful data for the Board of Commissioners as it relates to trees.
Very good, thank you. I appreciate all your time and all this. This is a good handover. I think we've got a lot of reading to do, obviously. I want to be protective of your time, Hoyt. We certainly might like to ask you back to be able to answer any questions for us as we get into this. But again, I'm protective of your time, so we'll see how that works out. Are there any further questions from the commissioners before I go to the public? Hearing none, we'll go to the public. Hoyt Decker. Sturgis,
Sure.
do you have anything further to say?
She may not know how.
Tom?
Yeah,
I'm working on it.
there she comes. She's
Okay, am I there?
Yes, you're
You're
there.
here. Go ahead, Sturgis.
Thank you. Yeah, if I were going to make another sort of dissenting note, and this is again about tree protection plans during construction. You know, we were really trying to err on the side of saying having as few words as possible. But my sense is that there may not be sufficient detail in the section that discusses tree protection plans during construction to empower the city or the arborist to enforce best practices during construction to preserve trees. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Sturgis. Tom, would you like to add anything?
If I was away on duties specified by my wife, so and again, cats and birds had to be fed. I got in on the end of one, and it may be a little redundant, but one may not have even been on the table. But with regard to what Sturgis just said and what I heard Hoyt saying earlier, at least about construction damage and all that stuff, is I know the one thing I hear from, I won't say from whom, but that one of the major reasons why when we block off or mark off with the orange stuff what should be a safe zone, that if you ask anybody who's supposed to inspect, there's not a big enough budget. So that in fact, our inability to monitor the behavior of construction is heavily driven by workforce time. Nobody got enough time to drive around and look and see that they parked 500 tons of something on the roots of an oak tree. And that's money. And that should be soaked up into building cost fees for builders, because we're not inspecting because they're not paying enough for us to do our job, which might be in your particular ordinance that's written. But if you don't have the money to do it, don't write the dang ordinance. Just that's my 2 cents worth about that. The other one is about resilience. And I haven't heard a lot about resilience with regard to trees, but trees are a key feature of resilience in a city, meaning we have resilience for infrastructure, we have resilience worries about our beaches, and we should be worried about resilience in our urban landscape. And with that in mind, one of the largest problems we have with growing trees is that we have power lines. We have power lines that carry every kind of communication possible, except for Rehoboth Avenue, Wilmington Avenue, Baltimore Avenue. And we should be thinking in the time of climate change no matter what's going on in politics, it's going to get worse before it gets better. And that we should be thinking about resilience and ways to fund incrementally putting every power line underground in town. Everything on poles underground, one block at a time. Because number one, that looks good for real estate values, if you want to think that way. Number two, it's resilient. We don't have to have trees not planted where they should be. We don't have trees falling on power lines. And right now we're being blind to the fact that we should have done this 30 years ago, 50 years ago when Country Club Estates did it for whatever reason. They didn't have any trees, but they put everything underground. Maybe we forced it, I don't know. But Stan, I think that, and Mayor and Commissioners, while it's not economically something you want to hear, it would be beneficial to the city in so many ways. And one of them is trees. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Commissioner LeGree?
Tom, I just looked up the numbers for Palm Beach.
I know.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I just looked up the numbers for Palm Beach. It's a town of 8,000 inhabitants. I'm not talking West Palm, I'm talking just the town. And they have been putting their power lines underground for the last, I think they've been working at this for 10 or 12 years. They're up to $128 million now. And I got this from,
I see it incrementally.
yeah,
Right.
it's mind-boggling and it's expensive, but it's something that we got to do. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. With that, I think we've got a good foundation for ourselves and for committees and commissions to be evaluating the new proposal in front of us from the Law Oversight Committee. We have established our objectives for review of the tree code and for what a tree code should have in it. We've got an outline of 12 items presented by Hoyt and the Law Oversight Committee as what he calls significant items to take a look at, as well as 3 items from Sturgis and 5 items from Hoyt that I think I would include in my evaluation of the tree codes. And from there, are there any other comments from the commissioners at this point?
Yes, Mayor.
Go ahead, Commissioner Gossett.
One thing that I would, I'd be happy to do this. I think in our objectives, we refer to the urban forest plan. And we haven't, there is set specifically a defined urban forest plan. So I would like to add that to, I don't say as just a reading document to familiarize not only ourselves, but the committees as we move down to the specific requirements or needs of what a urban forest plan really means. So just to add a definition, I'd be happy to create that for an accompanying document. So everybody's on the same kind of baseline of understanding the needs of an urban forest plan versus what the code can actually accomplish.
I think that would be wonderful, and maybe it could be accompanied by a urban tree plan from a small city, so that we can get an idea of what can be accomplished and what can be incorporated in such an urban tree plan. Thank you for offering, Commissioner.
That would be terrific.
Sure.
Where we're headed now is toward adjournment. If there's no further questions, our next meeting is undetermined. I would say it is definitely not on the 30th. I would pencil in April 6th, Tuesday, as our next date for a special meeting targeting trees. And from there, I want to contact the Parks and Shade Tree Commission, Trees and Green Infrastructure Committee, the Environmental Committee, talk with their chairs to see if they'll help evaluate the tree codes that are in front of us from their perspectives, and ascertain from them how much time they want. I would think that they might need 2, 3, or 4 months or so, but I'd like to keep the momentum going. I'd like to give them the minimum amount of time, but I want to give them sufficient time also, because they're only meeting, remember, 1 hour a month. With that, Commissioner, before we adjourn, Commissioner Gay?
Yeah, I was just gonna give an update on how I've done that with my committee. I had sent everyone a copy of the draft ordinance, and I've heard back from some, but not all. And I was actually, our next discussion here would actually be before our next tree committee meeting. So I wouldn't be able to take their comments and discuss it with the group as a whole until after we next meet again. But what I was going to say is that one of the things I'd like to do, I'm planning to do, is to take all of the comments I've gotten back and basically create a chart with each provision of the code revision and the comments I've gotten back. I mean, the sort of the feedback, the input, the changes, the likes, dislikes per topic, basically. So that the goal of our committee meeting, and it would probably be 2 committee meetings from now, would be to get a consensus of the committee as to what we would then come forward and recommend. But to divide it up by topic as a way of just being able to work through it.
Thank you. Commissioner Byrne?
Yeah, I just want to say, thinking of the Environment Committee taking a look at this, I think what Commissioner Gay was just suggesting would be extremely helpful, because we can have these committees do this and work very hard at it. And yet, if the information isn't organized in some way, what I think Commissioner Gay was just saying, it may not be that helpful. It may just be kind of helter-skelter reaction. So, I'm supportive of that direction.
Very good. Thank you very much. All right, with that, I want to thank all our watchers and thank Hoyt again and Sturgis and Tom for participating today, and anybody else that watched. And with that, I adjourn the meeting at 4:21 p.m. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.